of the northern armies of NATO. And they were in the same building and worked together.
Yeah.
So I'd only been commanding this company for about less than a year when they had an experiment. They were going to make my company into an international company. And this was really thrilling. We were going to have headquarters of myself, a Dutch captain and a Belgian lieutenant, with troops, of course, accordingly.
Yeah.
English sergeant major and an English quartermaster sergeant. And then 3 platoons. I kept one of my original British platoons, and I was given a Belgian platoon and a Dutch platoon, each commanded by their own officers.
Yeah.
And I had to make it work. Well, my colonel, the RASC colonel, was an absolute idiot. And he said, "Oh, this is going to be terrific." He said, "We can have an international football team, and we're going to win." And I knew this would be a disaster because they would take all my troops away.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do the job I was told to do. And so I went to the staff officer in headquarters who was organising this, a colonel in headquarters, a lovely man from the Scots Greys. And I said, "Look, sir," I said, "if you continue to have the thing run underneath the CRASC, that's Commander Royal Army Service Corps.
Yeah.
He's the man that looks after all the RASC in an area, you see." I said, "It's going to be a disaster for this reason." He said, "Well," yeah, he said, "interesting, leave it with me." And so I had to sweat for about 3 weeks. He sent for me finally. He said, "Charles," because you know my name's Charles, not Bill. Yeah. He said, "Charles," he said, "the powers that be have decided that I'm going to be your commanding officer." I nearly went on my knees and said, "Oh, thank you." So I'd escaped from the clutches of the... What? Yeah. And then I did a year there, and it really worked out brilliantly, and it was terrific. And unfortunately, what happened was that the man in the RASC who was responsible for postings hadn't had a command. And so he said, "Oh, that's a nice command, it's going very well."
This one.
Yeah, and so I had to go as a staff officer in the headquarters. And I spent 1 more year, or 18 months there, doing the supply of all lubes and fuels for the British Army, or British forces there, which was interesting too. I did a lot of travelling. But I also represented the British Army to various committees in NATO, which was... So that gave me another entry, and I thought, what am I going to do when I finish my time in Germany? And by this time I was speaking fluent French, so I took the French interpretership examination and passed that well.
Were you fluent in German as well?
No, I could speak German, but only... I didn't have much need to do it, because we didn't travel in Germany very much, well, only through it.
Yeah.
We always go to Belgium or Holland. I spoke more Dutch because I spoke Dutch with my second in command, of course.
And where were your daughters being educated at this?
Now, they were both in England.
Right.
My younger daughter went to the Royal School at Bath. That's the second top school for women in England, where she did about as well as I did at university. And she had several escapades, and they suggested that we might find it better if she went somewhere else. So we sent her to a convent in Tildonk in Belgium, and I've never been forgiven. Well, I have been just forgiven for that. Victoria went to another prestigious school in Bournemouth, where she did extremely well, and her daughter went to there afterwards and did well too. So where was I now? So then I was talking to an old friend of mine, a man called Curly Kale, what else, but, who was a staff officer in NATO in France, in Paris. And Curly said, look, he said, I'm retiring, he said, in a few months' time. Why don't you ask for my job? I thought, bloody oath, I will.
Yeah, fair.
So I slept in for that.
Yeah.
And I think that the RASC said, whew, thank God for that.
Problem solved.
Well,
Problem solved.
yeah, problem solved. So I got this fantastic job in France,
Wow.
which it deserves a chapter on itself,
Yeah.
because it's an amazing job. But so I spent 3.5 years in Paris.
So what were you doing there?
Very briefly, I was in what is known as the infrastructure branch, and in the petroleum side, I had a full colonel American as my boss. I had a full colonel French alongside me until the French threw us out, and we went to Belgium. And in the other office was a lieutenant colonel American and a lieutenant colonel from Germany, and we had a staff of about 5 or 6 clerks. And what we did was to take projects that all the countries, the 14 nations in NATO, would say, like, we want to put a pipeline from A to B, and can we do it, you see? And I would have to look at the project and see whether it was viable militarily wise,
Right.
financial wise, and technically. You with me?
Yeah.
Analysed it, advised my boss as to what, and he always took what we said, I think, pretty well. So I don't think he really knew much about what he was doing.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to the infrastructure committee, which was a top committee of NATO, which was manned by all the top financiers of NATO, to prove that it was viable or not viable. And I would sit behind the British full colonel, who was the military representative to the infrastructure committee, and normally he would, usually he presents the project, but in the case of the petroleum ones, he always got me to do it, because he said, I don't know what I'm talking about, you do, usually. And it was good fun, because the first 6 months I was there, I did nothing except read files, read myself into the job. So I knew what had happened right from the beginning of NATO in 55 or whenever it was, right to the present date.
Okay.
And when they quizzed me, there was a man called Russell, interesting English name, but he was a Dutchman, and he was their boss financier. And he would say, Major Ridley, I was a major then, he said, surely, didn't we've done something like this before, blah, blah, blah. I say, yes, sir, in 1956 this happened, this. And he'd shut up. And on one occasion, he saw me afterwards, said, can I have a drink now? He said, thank God we've got somebody who knows what's going on.
There's a lot there.
Which was, because I'd read it all in. Anyhow, then I'd have to go on inspections to see how the jobs were going on, acceptance inspections when they were finished, and maintenance inspections afterwards. Of course, you never did all that on one project, because, a project might take 5 years. So there were dozens of projects. So that was more or less what I did. And then the last 6 months we went to Belgium. And then the RASC was disbanded, thank God. There was a big shake-up in logistics in the British Army, and they disbanded the RASC, moved all its... See, the RASC had transport, supplies, cooking, clerks, and 1 or 2 other odds and sods. Well, they split it up, and all the transport side of it, both water and land, went to a new corps called the Royal Corps of Transport, the RCT, who really followed on from the RASC and took a lot of their nasty habits with them, unfortunately. All the supply side, clerks, petroleum, food, cooking, that sort of thing, went to the Ordnance Corps. So I found myself at the end of my tour in the Ordnance Corps. And before we left Paris, I think it was before I left Paris, yes, I had a letter saying you've been promoted Lieutenant Colonel. So that was after we'd gone to the Ordnance Corps. So I wouldn't have got it in the RASC. No way.
So it worked out well once again.
Yeah. So Christmas on 68, I think 67, I can't remember now exactly, but one year there I found myself in the big depot, one of the two big ordnance depots at Donington. And to show you and I was the chief administrative officer there.
Right.
And to show you to tell you what sort of size it was 8 miles around the perimeter. We had 18 lieutenant colonels in the place, 1 brigadier, and 3 full colonels,
Wow.
and God knows how many majors and captains, and only 60 troops. But my job was administration of some 3,500 civilians
What?
and 13 unions. And I had we had 800 houses in the town, which were War Department houses. We had a police force of some 60, a fire brigade of about 40, and I had all the fabric of the place to look after. Nothing to do with stores. I didn't touch the store side. That's the other 18 lieutenant colonels did that. But we had more item heads, in the store than Vauxhall, Morris and Ford put together. So that's the size it was.
That's amazing.
And we had one of 3 enormous computers at the time, the first original, which was bigger than the size of this room.
They were monsters, weren't they?
Yeah. And one was in Russia, one we had, and the other one I can't remember, but odd enough, my son-in-law worked on them.
Is that right?
Yeah, English electric computers. So then disaster fell. I'd been there a year and I was really enjoying it, and I thought, well,
this is for me. Yeah.
this is for me. Another 2 years. I mean, you're posted after 3 years. Maybe I could get promoted. You never know.
Yeah.
And my general came up to see us. He said, "Oh, Charles," he said, "I'm very sorry." And he said, "I know you like it here, but I'm going to have to move you." Oh, my face fell. I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, the top job in petroleum at the Ministry of Defence has come free suddenly, and I want you there." So I went to be the ADOS, Assistant Director Ordnance Services in the Ministry of Defence. And that was a disaster. I hated every minute.
You didn't like it?
No, I was pushing a desk.
No.
And with virtually no chance of going out, except that I was chairman of a international committee, which was...
So you would have been looking at another 3 years of that?
Yeah. And so after 18 months, I decided I'd go. And I've had a good friend of mine who looked after the promotions. I mean, he didn't say who was going to be promoted, but he ran the office where the promotions were dealt with. And I said, "What's my chance of being a general?" He said, 1 in 4. So I thought, no. 1 in 2,
yes.
I'd have gone, taking a punt on that. But
Because you're getting that close, weren't you?
yeah, so I asked to retire. And so I retired on my birthday in 1970. That's July 70. And I landed in Australia 26th of September.
How did your family take this?
Oh, very well.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Because we'd been living on a big boat in Paris. You've seen the pictures, haven't you?
Yes.
And we were thinking of paying guests, but Joan says no. She said, "You don't suffer fools gladly." I think it would be a disaster, and I think she was probably right.
Yeah.
So we came here, and well, there we are.
So what did you do when you first got here?
I bought a caravan and a Toyota Land Cruiser, one of the old truck type of Land Cruisers, and we hitched it up and we went out bush.
Okay.
And we spent 3 years out in the bush, not all the time, because I discovered gliding was a big thing here at the time.
Yeah.
And
So you're up in the Riverland?
no, not at that time. I was down in Benalla,
Okay.
in Vicky, and they asked Joan and I to do the administration for the national competitions in 1971,
Right.
which we did. And then I stayed on and managed the club at Manila for 6 months. And then we were asked to do the World Championships in Wakery in 74.
Yeah, I saw that up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in '72, Joan and I went over to England and then to Yugoslavia. We towed a glider to Yugoslavia for the champs in Yugoslavia in 1972 to see how it worked.
Mm.
What had to be done. Well, we found out how not to do it. And we learnt the lessons, and 74, they said at the time, was the best competitions ever. It's been superseded by a better one since, but
Yeah.
so that was very pleasing.
Mm. Were you missing the army life at this stage?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
No, no. I put it right behind.
That was your life, and I mean, to me, that's a pretty massive change.
Yeah, well,
Is that why you left England, just to get right away from it all?
Yeah, probably. Well, I was. I'm afraid England was. I could see the way it was going. It has gone, so I wasn't prepared to stay there. Adding to which, I wanted to travel and explore. Well, is that all right?
Yeah. Well, so 1974, and then.
Oh, do you want me to go on from
Yes.
there? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's interesting.
1974, we did the championships, and that was great. There's a lot of stories about that, of course, because Joan and I went to see various top people of different branches of civil life,
Yeah.
and got them on side. I mean, I went to see the Mr. Ramsey, who ran the Housing Commission at the time, and fortunately he said, well, yes, he can help, because they've got a half a dozen houses they built in a little close in Wakery, which they were going to use for civil servants of various sorts. And he fast-tracked them so that they were just livable in by the time the comps came.
Yeah.
And so we packed 8 or 9 in every room, and
Wow.
you know, and then I went to ATCO, the big people with mobile sheds and things over at Elizabeth here, and said, "Can you supply 26 buildings?" And all different sorts. And at what price? Thinking it would be 70, 80, 90, 100,000 for the 6 weeks. Came up $6,000.
Wow.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I went to the police, and they supplied an inspector,
Yeah.
2 sergeants, and about 20 men, and so on. So it pays to go to the boss. I went to Salisbury himself, you know. And,
So where were you living at this stage?
in a caravan at Wakery.
So you still were?
Yep.
Okay.
And I managed to do a lot of flying as well.
Oh, beautiful area to fly.
Oh
really.
yes, I must admit that Joan did all the work.
Yeah.
So after that, we thought we would go north bush-wise. 74, unfortunately, was the wettest summer for years, and we got as far as Broken Hill and couldn't go north over Stevens Creek, flooded. Or before that, we'd gone up to. We tried to go up the centre, you know, up the Alice, but couldn't. Absolutely hopeless.
Okay.
So we ended up at Tokenwall on the River Murray, where a good friend of mine had a commercial gliding establishment, and we camped there for a time, and then we bought a little cottage. That was the first house I had there in 74, I think, late 74. We were there till 79, and I drove a school bus there for a year, and I was installing colour televisions when they came in 76 or whenever it was, and repairing them, and that was quite interesting. We had one man, an Italian, who was dissatisfied with his AWA and put an axe through it.
That's pretty dissatisfying.
Yes. I don't blame him either, because it was a dog of a thing. I think the type only lasted about a year, and then they gave it away and bought in chassis from Mitsubishi in Japan.
So had you been over to Tasmania at this stage? Or?
No.
No?
I didn't go to Tasmania until 2000.
Oh, 2000?
Yeah. So anyhow, then we went bush and backwards and forwards, and I was driving the cattle trains up and the ore trains in the territory and that sort of thing.
How'd you find that?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, very tiring though. I could only do 3 months at a time, and then I was absolutely creased.
Yeah.
Because in those days, all the drivers were taking amphetamines to keep awake, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't take them. Thank goodness I didn't. So, you know, I'd be on the chin straps half the time. So, what else happened then? Oh, 70. Yeah, then we moved to the Upper Hunter Valley, and we bought 100 acres there, built a house on it,
Okay.
and a kit house, which we put up in 11 days to lock up. That's Joe and I and 2 men and their wives.
Wow.
It was good fun. And I didn't do much there except just build the gardens and everything, and Joan was growing herbs and things. And we had a foray into Amway, but that's not my scene at all. I can't sell. I don't want to either. I had a brief job, the only job I've been sacked from. There was a ex-lieutenant colonel from the engineers running the big unit that was building the railway from Ulan to Muswellbrook, from the coal mine. Whites were building this railway, or rather rebuilding it. It was an old railway and they were resurrecting it. And I happened to meet him in the pub one day, and he said, do you want a job? I said, well, yeah, I don't mind. And I thought it would be something in the way of engineering, but it wasn't. It was paymaster. Now, I can't add up 2 columns of figures and make them the same 3 times running. Even if I use a calculator, it tells me it's little porkies. So I lasted 3 weeks. But the only reason I think I was sacked is because their computer kept breaking down. And I was into computers by this time. And so I took the payroll program and put it on my own and produced it.
Okay.
And I must admit that I walked to the office and tra-la-la, I've done it on my computer. And I don't think the whites liked it. I think they were a bit, how should I say, peeved that theirs had broken down. So anyhow, I didn't like the job, so I was quite happy. And then that brings us almost up to the time when we came down here. We were going up and down to Adelaide to see my younger daughter, who was living by this time at Willunga, and it was 1,000 miles up and 1,000 miles down. So we said, well, let's try and find something here. So we bought a house in 15 acres in Willunga.
15 acres?
Yep, and on the hillside, and Joan ran a very successful herb farm.
Yeah.
Very. And we sold to all the top restaurants in town, and about 4 or 5 years, and then she suddenly got tired of it, sold it, and sold the whole lot to a very nice woman who still actually got it, but she's not supplying herbs, she's got the garden there. And June, what's her name? June Taylor, and she broadcasts every Sunday on herbs and other things. Yes, very nice woman. So then we went to America for 3 years. Not all in one go.
Yeah.
We moved to Upper Clapton, North Plimpton. That was a bad mistake. Joan didn't like the house, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I didn't consult her enough on that one. So we went to America and bought a motorhome, and we went there 4 times, and we spent 3 years in total there. Between 1994 and 99.
That would have been great.
Yep, it was. And we did 66,000 miles.
That was probably the last best time to be in America.
That's right,
Just
it
before,
was. Yep.
That was but I think America will ever be
Yep.
like it was back then.
Yep.
It was probably...
Our fuel bills, for example, averaged $1 a gallon.
Yeah.
A gallon, not a litre.
I know. I couldn't believe it when I was there back then.
I know.
Just say,
Oh, we loved it, every minute of it.
yeah.
And then we came back in '99, March '99. I bought the motorhome here in July '99, and then we went in 2000. We went to Tassie for the first time, and we went every year afterwards for 3 or 4 months of the year.
Yes.
And it's only this last year I haven't gone because I don't drive anymore. And then Joan died, unfortunately, in 2005.
Right.
And I couldn't stand living in the old farts home down at, oh, we'd gone to this retirement village by this time
Okay.
in McLaren Vale.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice,
Yeah.
but a bit expensive, but it wasn't my scene. And I was complaining about this to my daughter, and she said, well, get off your bottom and do something about it. And so we thought of buying in Adelaide. I said, no, I don't want to go. And then she said, why not Port Adelaide? And I thought, why not?
Had you had much to do with the port at all before?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Mm.
And it's the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Mm.
I've made more friends here in 3.5 years than any place I've ever been to before.
Is that right?
Yep.
Wow.
Far more. I mean, I would make some good friends in the army, but just every 3 years you move, of course. But here,
yeah, I must say I was very amazed with your 90th. That was just
well,
it was an amazing night. I mean,
wasn't it?
yeah,
80 odd people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and it was a great atmosphere, which you don't
Well,
get
no,
all the time.
Fantastic, wasn't it?
It was. Everyone got on well, and
Yep,
it was just a
yep.
really good night. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yes. Well, what would be the highlight of your life?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Probably Paris.
I thought so.
In the service, that is.
Yes.
Running I think one of the most interesting jobs I had was being chairman of an international committee.
Okay.
And that was quite an insight as to the differences in people, how they yeah.
It sounds like you're always highly motivated to move on through your life.
Oh, yes.
With whatever you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. When's the first time you went to the railway?
Well, I thought I'd have a little pub crawl when I got here to see where I was going to have a drink.
Yeah.
And I first went up to, now I've got to be careful here, I don't want a lawsuit. I went up to the ones up near the quayside there, and I wasn't impressed. The clientele were not the sort of persons I would really want to associate with. And then I went to the Globe, and I thought, well, this is a nice little comfy place. And there was the Greek gentleman who owned it, and he was serving the bar, and I was the only one in there. And I thought, well, this will do me. And so I went back there about 3 days later. It was closed. It's been closed ever since. Dion, he got sick, unfortunately, but I didn't realise that it was also frequented by others that I might not have considered, to be my scene. So then I went to the railway. Well, I'm still there. And yes.
No, that's a fantastic little pub.
Oh, wonderful. It must be the only one in Australia like that, I think.
I'd say it is unique.
Yeah.
I mean,